Welcome to the Hey Chaplain podcast. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. This podcast exists so that cops can hear encouragement from other cops. Even if you never talk directly to a police chaplain, I'm hoping that you might listen to a chaplain talk to other cops about being a wiser, healthier person. On this podcast, you'll hear from dispatchers and federal agents, sheriffs and U.S. Marshals, as well as the occasional patrol officer from Kansas City. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are giving you the wisdom gleaned from their experience so that you don't have to learn the hard way. Officers are asked to go investigate things that go bump in the night all the time. Spooky houses, hospitals, funeral homes, churches, and cemeteries are all places that have to be checked out. But at the department that I serve, there are multiple people who believe our headquarters building is haunted. It's an old building where you feel the history, with lots of long, dark hallways and questionable lighting. I'll be joking around about ghost stories, and the smiles will drop from the faces of professional men and women who suddenly get very serious and say, "No, I've seen things in that building." I asked for a volunteer to give me an example, and multiple people nominated Shawn Magee. He's a former SWAT sergeant turned captain in the Investigative Bureau, who now works overnights in one of the spookiest buildings in our city. Here's Shawn Magee. Hello, Shawn. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Doing all right. So I hear you grew up in a spooky house. Tell me about that.
I did. It was in Stillwell. We lived there till about the time I was about 4 or 5, and then we moved out, came back a few years later. It was a rental house. Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. I don't even know if it's still standing. So supposedly it was the second oldest house still standing in Johnson County. And my dad put my bedroom on the second floor. Typical old 1800s farmhouse. Mm-hmm. There was always something weird at that house. I literally did not sleep probably between my ages of 7 and 8 for a full year. I would try to get downstairs. I'd sleep one time I slept in the bathtub. I slept in the couches downstairs. Upstairs.
The house legitimately had you.
Correct.
Unsettled.
I lived, because my parents were divorced, I would live with my mom a week on, my dad a week off. And I remember just being able to catch up on sleep going to my mom's house because that house had some stuff going on. And it was down there by the Little Blue River where there used to be Indian settlements, and we'd rototill our garden and find bones and spearheads and Indian arrowheads.
This sounds a lot like the setup to the movie Poltergeist.
It definitely does. It definitely felt like that at 7 or 8 years old as well.
Yeah, that can't help. No.
But I remember vividly, it was weird, the second floor, if you were laying in my bed and you looked to your left, you would see the staircase going down, and it was that quintessential creaky 1800s staircase. You know, every step you took, it sounded spooky. I remember looking over one night, and I just saw it look like a female shadow figure coming out of an adjacent room on that second level, kind of turned and looked at me, didn't have any eyes, and then just kind of wispily went down the stairs, and
so are you having one of those kind of waking dreams where you're laying in bed and you can't move, or is this like you're wide awake?
Wide awake, because it was so weird. As soon as my dad would put me up there and try to put me to sleep, he'd maybe even lay there with me a little bit, and I'd pretend to be asleep, and he'd sneak his way down the spooky staircase that made all these noises. But it seemed like I would never sleep, and for a long time you thought maybe it was just a kid being scared.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, you get told that. You get told, hey, it's just your imagination.
Correct.
Yeah.
But, now that I get older and seen some other stuff, you're wondering maybe there was something going on. Because, there was just always something, a weird heavy feeling. You could cut the air with a knife.
Yeah.
Stuff would go moving around.
How far was this house from the neighbors?
So you would go into a neighborhood. The owners of the house lived... it was on 80 acres, and the old farmhouse was way down at the bottom of a valley, down by the river. So you're probably a quarter of a mile to half mile away from the next house.
Yeah. See, I grew up out in the country, and people don't appreciate that there's some really spread out places. Where I grew up, we were maybe every bit of a half mile from the nearest other house.
Yes.
And so if something's going to crawl out from underneath the bed and get you, you had a long run to get the help. Yeah.
And you go into the basement and all the beams holding up the house are just basically halved tree trunks. I mean, it's that old of a house. But yeah, there was definitely something going on there. I don't know if it was whether you mix Indian burial or tribal areas with the water and then the old house, but there was definitely something.
Did you watch horror movies as a kid or
no?
Like that?
My dad was pretty good at keeping me away from that, except for one time at like 5 he showed me the movie Predator, which scared me to death. But now I watch it, it's not that bad, but then it was horrible. Yeah. But I mean, we've done pretty good with not having that. It was just, even as a little kid, you could feel something wasn't just right about that. Now, according to my dad, I talked to him years later about it. He thought I was just a kid, just being scared. So maybe he didn't feel it, or maybe he's lying. But I definitely feel like there was something going on there. So,
what led you to go into law enforcement?
It's kind of weird. I went into college as a pre-med. That was supposed to be my whole goal, was to be a doctor. I think between sports and traveling all the time.
Because you were also a college athlete.
Correct. Yeah, I played football at K-State. It was kind of hard to keep up. To be honest, I'm not the brightest bulb in the room, but trying to get through organic chemistry along with playing sports, it's not the easiest, traveling all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember it was about my junior year, somebody told me to pick a job that you could go to, and every day you feel excited about, something new, not just your typical desk job where it's the same thing. And I started thinking about law enforcement. I had a type A personality. So I just started applying. I remember there was still a year left of college and applying with everybody around the metro. And I almost got hired by Shawn Magee Police Department, but I still had a semester left in school. And it was kind of like, hey, we need you now or you're going to miss it. And I said, well, I'm not going to not get my degree, 6 months out. So I ended up at KCK. I always wanted to work in the high octane area. So I bid our 113's district on midnights my first time I could bid, which is between 10th and 18th in Quindaro.
That's the busy downtown area.
It would be busy,
in our
correct.
Town. Yeah.
Correct, yes. And it was a blast. I mean, I would have worked on my days off. I mean, it was car chases, foot chases, had a good crew of buddies.
Yeah.
And it was just an absolute blast. Would have worked on if they would ask me on my day off to come and work for free, I'd have done it. It was just fun. But yeah, when I finally got promoted to sergeant, was in patrol briefly, went right into the Special Operations Unit, which is our SWAT team here in KCK. Mm-hmm. Did that, probably 3 or 4 years, got promoted to captain. From captain, I did, again, another brief stint in patrol, went to command over the Violent Crime Task Force / Narcotics Unit. Mm-hmm. Did that for about a little over a year, maybe a year and a half, until the captain that was formerly in our Special Operations Unit got promoted to major, so I slid in there because I had the prior training and was in there basically till about a year and a half ago when we had our second baby, and I couldn't roll the pager anymore like I used to with childcare, so the chief in our department was nice enough to ask what would be beneficial for me, and I said night response in the Detective Bureau would help out so I could watch our babies during the day and go to work at night.
So, Shawn, you had multiple coworkers who nominated you to tell some ghost stories. What do you got? Early
in my career, maybe mid-range in my career, we get dispatched, and it was actually, they were still daylight on afternoons, to a burglary in progress at a house where an elderly lady said she heard somebody crawl in her house and was making noises. And anybody who's been in policing knows those come around a lot, and especially with the elderly, they hear things.
Yeah.
So I hate to say it, but going into it, I was kind of like, we're going to walk through, double check it, tell her everything's okay and leave.
Yeah, assume it's dementia or
correct,
or just some innocent sound that she's mistaken about.
Yes. Yeah. So me and our sergeant went to this house, and it was, again, right around 9th and Parallel. And we go in, and she's like, hey, I heard something in the back. And so we do the whole, flashlights out, guns drawn, clearing room by room by room, and we've cleared 99% of this house, and all of a sudden, behind us, there was a wide open door, slams shut. I mean, like somebody had kicked it shut so hard. It wasn't just a little tiny, air conditioner made it shut. I mean, it sounded like somebody booted it. Me and Sergeant Kearney obviously have a reaction, And we go into that room where the noise came from, and we saw the door slam, and there's nobody in there. So we're trying to make light of it. We're a little spooked, but we're like, oh, it was probably this or that.
How old are you at this point?
Probably 26, 27.
Okay, so fairly young, just a few years on.
Correct. And then, the sergeant with me, it was the old salty senior master sergeant.
Been there forever.
5,000 years.
Yeah.
So he's even spooked, but, I'm kind of leaning on my old school sergeant. He seems okay. So we leave. Well, as we go outside, the old lady's son shows up. He's probably in his 40s or 50s. And we tell him, hey, we checked the house. Everything seems okay. Would you like to come in just to double check? And he said adamantly, I will never set foot in that house again. I grew up in that house. He said that house is haunted, scares the death out of me. I've tried to get her out of this house, but she's like attached to it. And he would not, visible fear on his face, would not even go into this house during broad daylight, 7 o'clock on a summer afternoon.
Yeah.
Would not go in that house. So it kind of gave a little bit of validity of what we had heard and seen with that door slamming. As hard as somebody could kick it. It was that hard.
Right.
And I've drive by that house sometimes, even now, and kind of just look out of the corner of my eye and just... give it respect. You don't want to take anything home. Just how you doing? Drive by it.
Yeah.
So
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it was a spooky feeling. I don't know how to describe it.
And you haven't been called back to that?
I have not personally. I've drove by that house, and again, it's kind of like where you just look at it and you're like, hey, how are you? Good to see you. You give you respect.
Yeah.
See you later.
I'll keep my distance.
Yeah, just don't follow my car home. But yeah, it's still standing there. So.
Do you have any idea what happened to that lady?
I don't. At this time, I'm 40 now. Unless she's, on that.
Yeah, she'd be north
plus.
of 100.
Oh, yeah. Correct. Yeah. So she's probably passed away, and I'm sure the son, the way he acted that day, he probably never went back and sold it.
House like that, maybe she's still there.
Oh, God. Maybe she is. I ain't going to find out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, tell me about our headquarters.
So, headquarters, for anybody that hasn't, ever seen it before, it's right at the corner of 7th and Minnesota and State Avenue, between those two blocks.
Kind of takes up like half a city block.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like a 3-story brick structure where the top of it's kind of got like almost like a romantic facade to it.
Yeah.
Used to be, before we had it as the police department, the Board of Public Utilities building. Mm-hmm. And from what I've gathered, research-wise, before that, it was a Montgomery Ward building in the 30s.
Yeah.
And we've even got pictures on our old archive drive at the police department of Eisenhower giving speeches right in front of it.
Yeah.
Because there was a very famous hotel across the street that's now a high-rise, but I guess that's where a bunch of famous people stay when they visit Kansas City.
Yeah, right in the main drag of the oldest part of town. That building has to be pushing 100 years old.
Has to be.
Yeah, I don't know the history behind it myself, but it's obviously, when you come into it, it's obviously an old building. It's been repurposed and remodeled multiple times. There's all kinds of weird, random hallways and whatever because of different occupants have needed it for different purposes. And so certainly for me, like coming in as an outsider, as a chaplain, I've still not had a full tour of that building. I've wandered around it a few times. I have been invited to go here or there, but every now and again I find, oh, here's another set of bathrooms, or here's another hallway. It's kind of one of those buildings.
I haven't even seen the whole thing. Supposedly, I've never seen the 3rd-story property room. Yeah. I've always wondered where all this property's kept, but I've never seen it. My wife was a cadet, so she's probably seen a lot more of it, but I have not.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's big. It's got high ceilings. So we say 3 stories. It's
probably a 5 to 6 story.
Yeah,
type.
It's a lot taller than a 3-story building.
Like you said, the way it's been cut up and moved around. You could tell parts of it, like the women's restrooms. They have like a waiting room, like a powder room.
Right,
they probably had that in the old Montgomery.
Well, I don't go in the women's room.
I didn't. Yeah. We'll get to this story later of why I know this, because that was the first thing I thought was odd.
But there's a basement garage.
Yep.
There's and like I said, it just keeps, and the floors don't all line up perfectly, and so you just keep going up another half flight of stairs to another set of rooms, and it's just a very large, empty feeling building.
Very empty, and I wouldn't not want to go into it without the lights on, it's kind of got a weird vibe.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could describe it.
Well, I have gone in late at night because I'll be on my way to roll calls. And there used to be a patrol roll call there.
Correct.
But now they've moved to a different building. So now if I'm just early, I'll stop in and check. And sometimes you're the only one in your office, maybe a couple other detectives.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the building is pretty dark and pretty spooky.
It's pretty empty. Yeah, I mean, I kind of had a little bit of a blanket, I could wrap around myself knowing that our Central Patrol Division was still down there. So there was always somebody there, usually 24/7 doing reports, a sergeant. Yeah. Now that they've moved on to a different building, and some nights where maybe my detectives are out or all off, I'm the only one in the big spooky building. Yeah. And it's and they always keep the lights just half dim, where it's even spookier.
Yeah.
I'd rather just be black, jet black than just like those like the blinky lights down the hallway because they're all bulbs and they kind of fizzle.
Yeah.
It's just got a creepy vibe to it. I was never housed at headquarters during this time period. I was housed in the Special Operations Unit building, but we always had to go drop our overtime sheets and sign-in sheets to the operations colonel's office to have the next day.
So you're like the SWAT team sergeant coming from another location, other part of town, but you're dropping off paperwork.
Just dropping off paperwork late at night. Well, my wife was a detective at the time, literally where I'm at now, night response, the commander over. She was one of the detectives, and we knew that night she was the only detective working. Mm-hmm. So me going there, I knew pretty much she was going to be the only person in the building. So the detectives where her office is on the mezzanine level, which is between the first and second floor. I had to go to the second floor, which is where the operations office is. So again, I parked downstairs in the basement. We talked about parking. I get in the elevator. I hit the 2, get off, and it's just that quintessential like halogen bulb flickering. I mean, they got half the lights on. I mean,
if you wanted to make a movie in there and make it look creepy, you would not have to bring your own lighting.
No.
It's already lit.
They don't have
creepy.
LEDs and no LED bulbs. It's just that, the bad tube lights that start flickering. They just make noise and they're spooky.
Yeah.
So I get off, and what's embarrassing to admit is I'm now at this time like a 32-year-old SWAT sergeant, supposed to be this tip of the spear.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, I get off this elevator and I just want to draw my Glock out of my holster, even though that wouldn't work on a Spirit. But so I get off and I turn left to go to another hallway. Like I said, this thing's a maze. And there's a hallway, this main hallway that is like probably 40 yards long that goes by the chief's office, where I'm about to turn into. You basically have a linear hallway that goes all the way down, and on the left side is the chief's office. It comes to a T intersection, and if you go left, there's a men's restroom. If you go right, there's a women's restroom and that operations office where I got to drop my stuff. But that office is locked to only like the chief, a colonel. There's no normal patrolman or sergeant can get in there. But that being said, when you turn down that hallway, when they hit that T intersection, you can't see the entry doors to the men or women's restroom. It's just they're there from seeing the layout. Yeah.
And you are deep into the labyrinth at this point.
Yeah, you're off the elevator. I know
where you're talking about. You are not just like 5 feet off the elevator.
No.
You are down a hallway, down another hallway, down a third hallway. Mm-hmm. You are way back.
Back there. So as I come to turn left to look down this long linear hallway, and again, you got to put the lighting in perspective. It's every second ceiling light is on, and it's a flickery bulb.
Yeah.
I see... As soon as I look down the hallway, I see what looks like maybe a 5-foot tall, all long black hair, wearing all black clothing. Literally maybe took 3 or 4 steps, then turned right towards the women's restroom or the operations room. And it looked like a small female figure almost. I would have bet my pension it was my wife. So I go, okay, she's going to the bathroom. I'm going to go scare her. She's the only one I know that's in this building, and that's where she would go to the restroom, and she walked towards that way. And I knew she couldn't get in the operations office because nobody's got access. Dead end, other than that restroom.
Right.
So I walk down, and I kind of hide by the door, and my whole thing was I'm going to scare her when she comes out. And literally at that point, to kind of put in perspective, I would have, again, bet my pension that was my wife. It looked like a small female, dark hair, back to me walking, and usually wearing a dark polo shirt, maybe some dark, pants.
Yeah.
So I stood there for probably 5 minutes. Nothing. You don't even hear any movement in the bathroom. So finally I text her. I was like, you gonna, like, what's going on in there? You coming out? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I know you're in the bathroom. Like, ha ha. And she goes, I'm not in the bathroom. I'm in the mezzanine at my desk. So now, like, the hair on my neck stands up. So I have to check at this point. I mean, I'm scared, but I have to check.
And I'm alone in buildings, in church buildings, by myself late at night. If I'm carrying, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Even though we know, like, from what our knowledge is of ghosts, spirits,
but
it
still,
won't work.
But still,
I'm going to give
I feel better.
I'm going to give them hell. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give them every of the 17 friends in my magazine. They might not like the 1,700 feet per second or whatever I got. So again, I unholster. Again, I don't know why we do it, but it's like a pacifier. It makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I walk in the door, and the first surprise I see is that female restrooms in this building have like a little lounge area.
Yeah.
This was never known to me in
men's room anywhere.
My decade of policing before. There's a couch, there's a chair. It's like, I don't know. Like, I almost was like, this is kind of nice. I was like, all the fear of the spirit went away. It was just, this is kind of cool. They have a waiting area, and I kind of wiped that off.
First time you ever been in a women's room.
Correct.
Yeah. Maybe they're all like that.
Maybe they all. Maybe maybe that's why they're so happy to go there. I don't know. So after that first initial shock of how awesome this is that they have their own little lounge, I'm back to fear now because of the spirit. So I walk farther in, and I open the door, and I don't want to get, like, in trouble, like some, creepy guy. So I was like, hey, it's Shawn. Is there anybody in here? No response. So I walk in there, and I checked every stall. There's nothing. Zero zilch. So, I would have heard the operations door, the key card access, unlocking it, at least at closing. Nobody at that time would have had access to get in there. The only door was that, and it was...
And there's no janitor down the hallway or something.
Mm-mm. And again, even if there was, I would have heard that key card because it makes an audible, like, beeping sound.
Yeah.
And at that night, you're going to hear it. So, honestly, I wish somebody would have either clocked my 40 time from that bathroom to my wife's office, because I'm pretty sure Usain Bolt has nothing.
What position did you play at K-State?
Offensive line, but I would have walked
Fastest
on water.
Offensive lineman ever.
You have never seen speed like this. I felt... Now, if somebody would have videotaped it, it'd probably been horrendously slow, but I felt like I was just walking on water. I was sprinting so fast. I ran down the stairs of the mezzanine, breathing hard, because I'm obviously not a beacon of physical fitness. And I get down there, and she asks me what's going on, and I tell her, and she's like, I've been here the whole time, and now she's even worried to go to headquarters.
Yeah.
And it just keeps on going there. I work there, like, right after this. I'm going to go to work in that mezzanine area at headquarters, and we've had there's always something going on in that building. I'm telling you, whether it's doors
because
slamming.
It was just a department store, and then it was like an office building.
Yeah.
But when it became a police station, that does introduce a little bit of creepiness. It has to,
because I'm like, who would want to haunt the old Montgomery Ward building?
Right.
That'd be like if I pass on, I'm not going to go haunt, Walmart.
There's a disgruntled employee.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And so the only thing I can think of is, obviously we have human remains from whether it's cold cases, homicides. I can't figure out who would want to haunt that place. It's not like it was some old church or morgue, or I think it's the stuff that we as a police department have probably brought into there.
Yeah.
That could have, some spiritual
human
stuff.
remains and various evidence that's connected to homicides and
now the
all
good
sorts
thing
of
is
stuff that it could make the hair on your arm stand up.
Correct. Nothing in there I felt has been trying to harm me or nefarious or anything. It's just, like we've have doors that you'll hear open up in the Detective Bureau at night when there's nobody there.
Yeah.
I saw another spirit figure in there before. As recent as a year ago, I thought somebody walked by my office, so I came out, and they went into either the captain down the hall from me or the other captain farther down the hall. I legitimately saw a man-sized figure go in one of those offices, 100%. I was like, I'm going to go say hi to him. I went to the first office, nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, they're in the second office. It's probably, Captain Smith. Go down there, nothing. So it's like my second full-fledged spirit apparition I've seen in that building. So,
is anybody else having these experiences, or are you alone? Are you the only one?
No. So my detectives here, they could give you a whole 10-hour segment on stuff they've heard in there. Now, one of our other captains who's actually in the Bureau with me, she says in that same exact bathroom, now this would have been after what I've seen because I brought it up to her and she was almost, didn't want to tell anybody because they think, she's
right.
Crazy or something. She's like, I had the same thing happen to me in that same bathroom except for when I went in to look, there was a woman figure with like hair and stuff and she ran out of there. Now, supposedly she's seen...
Katie ran out.
Katie ran out,
right,
but she said she saw like it looked like the girl from The Ring.
Right.
Long hair or whatever. So
yeah.
And
that's why I asked about if you grew up on horror movies, because I kind of feel like there's some people who they have these images planted in their head and they don't need something real, something, spiritual to be happening. They've already got that in their psychology and they're already thinking that. They're already, it just would take a moment of their brain kind of, just one little misfire of a neuron and you think you're seeing something that you actually saw in a movie. But I think it's interesting that you've got a history of running into stuff, but you weren't primed for it.
No.
Yeah.
No, I've always had, maybe just from growing up as a little kid, or maybe you're born with it, like a little bit of a sense when you can walk into a room and feel stuff that other people don't feel, like a heaviness or something isn't right.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to train as a SWAT team at the old annex, and I guess in the 30s was, there's...
As an old creepy building.
Oh.
Yeah.
We've had some experiences in that place, so...
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just unlucky, and I hope that's so. I've never had nothing try to harm me. Maybe it's because every time I drive by the house at night, the parallel, I'm like, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Yeah. Whether you're demonic, good, bad, or how you doing?
Yeah.
See you later. Yeah. So I try not to bring that stuff home.
Well, it is a topic that does occasionally come up when officers talk to the chaplain. They're like, you know what? I've been unsettled for years because I think I saw something, and I don't have answers for that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really particularly a ghost story person myself, but I don't know what all's out there, and I know enough to know that I don't know everything. I don't actually have an answer. And so
I'm just hoping, if I'm good enough to go to the pearly gates, because I do believe in Jesus and God, and that when we get up there and you say you'll know everything, I want to know where Hoffa's buried, who was on the grassy knoll, what was in headquarters. I'm going to have a whole list. They're going to probably kick me out of heaven.
What was that thing I saw? Yeah.
Yeah, what was that, and who was on the grassy knoll, and where's Jimmy Hoffa buried?
Yeah.
So if we can get that clarified, I'll be good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Shawn. I appreciate you coming in and telling me. Yeah, that's great. I do not have an explanation for why our headquarters building provokes such a response from so many people, but I am inclined to put together a compilation of spooky sightings and ghost stories about that building. Maybe it'll be therapeutic to get that off your chest. Maybe it'll just be fun. But I'm putting that in my notes right now for next year. So if you have a ghost story or a spooky sighting about our headquarters building in KCK, go to the show notes, find my email, and drop me a line. I'd love to talk to you. On a more serious note, there are so many law enforcement stories that are so sad and so tragic, there's nothing fun or funny about them. So, just like gallows humor, maybe we need a ghost story once in a while, something to help us laugh in the face of death, and then maybe set a new land speed record hightailing it out of there. It's good for us. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
I hear a gunshot, and I remember smelling the gunpowder, the gun smoke. And my first thought was, oh, no, he's got my gun, right? And now I'm going to be struggling for my own gun from this guy. But I look down, I take a peek between me and him, and I could see that he had a gun in his back pocket. And he, with his right hand, had got a hold of it, but didn't clear it from his back pocket. So it got hung up in his, at the back of the corner of his pocket and blew out part of his pants. And sent around somewhere, and someone was looking out for me that day because that round went somewhere between my legs and down Polk Street.
This show is commercial free because listeners who feel they've received some value from Hey Chaplain return the favor by buying me a virtual coffee at buymeacoffee.com/HeyChaplain. You don't have to do that, but thank you. It really does mean the world to me. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.